Hey guys, it's me Edgar, here to do a video response to my good friend Tevia, and this is a good discussion that Tevia did, and I really enjoy his videos, and he really does a great job on his opinion, but he makes a good point. Should Marvel Comics retire Peter Parker and have him get with Mary Jane and have their story kinda ended, but be a supporting character for Miles if case the story needs it to be, and have Miles Morales not only take the Amazing Spider-Man book, but be Marvel's new Spider-Man? My answer is yes, it should. But will it happen? No, it won't. Because this is the thing about legacy characters, no matter if the character is better than the original, people always prefer the original than the legacy character, because people don't give a fuck about that character. And I will say this for me, as a fan of Spider-Man, ever since the death of Gwen Stacy, it's all an agenda. They killed off Gwen Stacy because they didn't want to have Peter Parker get married. They eventually did with Mary Jane, and they undo that because they want to go do what was great about the character. Keep him single. That's literally it. And for me to buy Marvel, to not only have him get back to Mary Jane and then pass the mantle to Miles, is never gonna happen. Not in a million years. One, I don't think Marvel would allow Miles to be your new Amazing Spider-Man. And two, even we have Peter Parker get back together with Mary Jane, which I don't want, because one, it was a political agenda, because when they killed off Gwen Stacy, they had no choice to have Peter Parker hook up with Mary Jane, and it was the most forced fucking relationship from the very beginning, and you couldn't tell me that person who was with Gwen Stacy, you're telling me 30 issues later, this guy falls in love with another woman after he lost his first love? Get the fuck out of here. That was a political agenda from the very beginning. And the character had no infatuation on that character, Mary Jane, in the very beginning. And I get these gullible fans says, oh, he had to grow up anyway. Yeah, that's right. You pretty much just accepting what was already done, and it just ruined the character, and you just suck it up and fucking deal with the bullshit. But yeah, you bitch about Mary Jane and Peter Parker selling their love with the fucking devil. Sorry, I would rather have them not be together. But if they're gonna be together, they have to do something with that relationship that hasn't been done before. Maybe taking notes from Renew Your Vows that I could fucking accept and enjoy. And I've talked about this with my good friend Tevia, and I said if they have them just hook up just because the fans wanted to go that direction, I'm not going to pick it up, because why should I read a book that appeals to a fucking minority audience that doesn't want to grow the fuck up? And another thing is, if they do this direction, I don't think people would accept Miles to be the new Amazing Spider-Man. And honestly, I have this opinion that Dan Slott screwed Bendis, because Dan Slott was holding Peter hostage because he knew if Bendis took over on the Amazing Spider-Man title, he would not only have Peter Parker get back with Mary Jane, but he would also have Peter retire and give it to Miles. And he was not going to let that happen. You could tell from the comparisons on people's reaction to both books, the Spider-Man book and the Amazing Spider-Man. People said Bendis should took over. Bendis took over. He needs to take over Spider-Man. He understands the character, and he's just not going to let that happen. He knew that, and he hold that character hostage. It's a shame we never seen what Bendis would have done in the Amazing Spider-Man title. Even though he's written the 616 version of Spider-Man, I think he would have brought a lot more, not only interesting development on Spider-Man, but overall a better direction. But I think personally Dan Slott screwed him over, and I think Bendis decide, you know what, maybe I just leave Marvel and just go do other companies and pretty much leave. And that's it. And that's what happened. And it sucks. And I really did not want that. And I really wanted to see Dan Slott leave and Bendis took over as Spider-Man. And it was never going to happen. And for a moment when I saw that, I knew that whole dream of seeing Miles being your new Amazing Spider-Man, having Peter Parker retire and get married with Mary Jane again, nope, not gonna ever happen. Even we do, it will only last a year, maybe 2 at least. It will not be permanent. And that always is the case in the Marvel 616 universe. Outside continuity, completely different story. It worked in the Ultimate Universe. It will never work in the main core universe of Marvel. It's just never going to happen. As for Mary Jane and Peter Parker getting back together, I don't give a fuck about that relationship, because it was always an agenda that Marvel did. If you want to know my personal feelings on that, I think they should never hook up, because there was no development on that relationship to make where all of a sudden 30 issues in, after the death of Gwen Stacy, you're telling me he likes Mary Jane? Get the fuck out of here. This is a fucking guy that says, another day without Gwenny. And all of a sudden Gwen shows up and pretty much said, oh, Peter, I love you so much. And pretty much they kiss and they tell us how much they love each other, and just pretty much, honestly, I always will look at Gwen Stacy as the true love of Peter Parker's life. I really don't like the fact that she's ignored for almost 70 or 80 years now, and everyone wants to see Peter hook up with Mary Jane, because I'm going to say this, Mary Jane was just pretty much damage control until they actually really did something with that relationship, because the moment that Gwen Stacy died, they ruined the character of Spider-Man. And the fact they did that, and the aftermath, 30 issues, he had no motivation to hook up with Mary Jane. And all of a sudden, 2 issues, he has motivations on Mary Jane? No way. I could never accept that. And that's not Peter Parker. Peter Parker would just look at Mary Jane as a average person, like you and I. And the fact is, Mary Jane was just damage control until writers decide, okay, if we're going to do this relationship, we got to make it work. And it did. I'm not denying that, but it's just the way it started, it was just damage control. And it was just literally an agenda for that character for Marvel wanted to go. And personally, I don't like that. To me, Gwen is the true love of Peter Parker. And I really don't know what to say. If they have them hook up, great, cool, more power to us. But if you're just going to do the same shit that you've done with that character and that relationship, don't put them together. Because honestly, I would rather read the older Spider-Man comics and accept that, and accept the newer stuff as just newer stories. Not just an nostalgia because someone doesn't want to fucking move on. That's just how it is. Anyway, I'm kind of done now. I'm sure I'm going to be hated because I'm anti-Spider-Man Mary Jane relationship. I really am not. I love the relationship in the Ultimate Comics between of them. I love the Renew Your Vows. But I just feel like the way it was handled was the worst way. And I just feel like if we're gonna have them hook up again, you better do something different that's actually worth reading. And not just to appeal a fan base that really they should just grow the fuck up and move on. Because Extalgia could only go so far into a point that it's just appealing to a minority of fans that just want to remind themselves what they grew up on. And honestly, if you want to do that, you might as well just read the older comic books. That is just saying a lot. I'm talking to you, Mr. Superman Extalgia boy. But just, I'm saying how I feel. If we're going to have them get back together, you better do something worth a shit reading. Because honestly, comic books needs to be evolve and do something great. And having Miles be the new Amazing Spider-Man would be a good direction. But you're never going to have that. Why? Because reasons that honestly just never going to happen. You're never going to have Miles to be the new Amazing Spider-Man. You're never going to have Peter Parker hook up with Mary Jane. And if you do, it's only going to last so long into where, they broke up again. Just not even, it's not even worth it. It's just not. I mean, when I read new Spider-Man stories, I just want to see Spider-Man be a superhero, try to do what he needs to do to fight the villain, and that's really it. That's all I care for. The day and age of Peter Parker getting a relationship and all that shit is over. That's done. It's done to death, and honestly, I think we all need to move on from Marvel and the fans' case scenario. And also another thing is, if we're gonna have them get back together, Mary Jane and Peter Parker get back together, cool, more power to them. But it's just, I really don't care. Because, you know, as much as I like that relationship when it actually got good, I think they'll just play the fans. And they'll do something stupid just to piss them off. And honestly, I think we all need to drop it. And just move on. Anyway, I'm done now. I rest my case. No matter what anyone else says, we just need to do better stories with Spider-Man. And it looks like we're doing that. But it's just, for me, I think the fans need to let go that dream of having Miles being the new Amazing Spider-Man, having Peter retire, and all that shit, because that's never going to happen in the comics. And if it did, it will only last maybe a year or two. That's at least. Maybe a little bit longer. They're just not going to let Peter retire and have Miles Morales be your new Amazing Spider-Man. Not going to happen. Anyway, I'm done now. I'm going to go play Miles in his new game. It's a really good game. Let's Play is coming this week. And also my review on PS4 Spider-Man and Miles Morales next week. Review is coming on those two games. But I'm just saying this from the heart as a Spider-Man fan. I don't see it happening, and I really don't care if Peter and Mary Jane get back together. If they do, great. But I'm always going to say Peter Parker's first love and true love will always be Gwen Stacy. And no one could say otherwise. And you couldn't tell me that Spider-Man is the same Spider-Man from Amazing Fantasy all the way down to Amazing Spider-Man issue 30 to 31 is the same Spider-Man. And they did not force that relationship in the very beginning, because deep down Marvel knew they fucked up the character and they had no choice to fix that character with another relationship that clearly he was not ready for. And it's just, It is what it is. I'm sure I'm going to be the minority. I'm sure I'm going to be that one guy that says how he feels and how Spider-Man fans always tell me where he had to move on. That's all I get with them. He had to move on. Yeah, you say that, but you bitch and moan to where he didn't want to move on the whole one more day scenario. Congratulations, I got you there.